Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And this week, joining us from, autumn in Germany is Sofia Katsaouni. Hey, Sofia. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Vasco. Very happy to be here. Good to
Likewise, see you. Happy you could make it, and happy to hear also the stories and all of the experiences you have to share with our listeners. So Sofia is a dedicated Agile and Organizational Coach who places people and their needs at the forefront. Transitioning from electrical engineering, she applies analytical skills to empower high-performing teams with an emphasis on trust and psychological safety. Sofia enables startups and scale-ups to foster human-centric and performance-driven culture. So, Sofia, that was a short intro. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
So thank you so much for this amazing intro, Vasco. I will steal it from you, as I said already, this very beautiful summary. So my path is, I guess, interesting, like most Agile coaches and Scrum Masters, because it's not really that there is a university or something someone studies to become a Scrum Master or an Agile coach. So like many other people, I was doing something else before. And basically my background, as you said, is in electrical engineering. So when I finished my studies, when I got my diploma, I came to Germany. I'm originally from Greece and started working as an engineer because that makes a lot of sense, coming to Germany as an engineer, right? And I started working in a company in the quality assurance space as an electrical engineer. And at that point, very soon, there was this magic phrase many people say, which is, we want to become more agile. I'm sure many of us have heard this. I heard it too. So at that point, I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I have no clue what this word means. So I started looking around, of course, like Googling, right? That's what engineers do, Googling stuff. And then I understood a little bit of what that is. At the same time, my partner then was working as a developer in a company and they had a Scrum Master. So this person was, my ex-boyfriend was explaining to me what this person does. So a little bit on the background of that, when I was studying, I was a member of a student NGO. And there I was doing many things with teams. I was a board member. I was mentoring new people. I was becoming a soft skills trainer and doing many things like that, basically. But when I was studying, I had no clue what that could be as a profession or anything close to that, how one can make money with this. So when I was hearing, oh, we want to be more agile, and I learned what the Scrum Master people kind of do, I was like, oh my God, that sounds very similar to what I was doing back then. I want to try this out. So then I went to my manager and said, hey, you want to be more agile? I want to try this out. Can we make this a match? And of course, then, like in many big German companies, they sent me to get certified because you cannot do anything if you're not certified, right? So I went in a 2-day training and then theoretically I became a Scrum Master for a team.
I like how you presented it. I was trying to figure out how I could make money from my skills. That's
Yes.
It's always a worry, right? Because either we are rich and then we don't need money, or then we are not rich and then we do need money. And of course, because of that, it's a very it's something that when we find something we love, we want to turn it into something like an occupation, maybe not a job, but a side hustle, whatever that is. And it makes perfect sense. And it turns out that software development requires all of those skills you were practicing as you were a student.
Exactly.
Teamwork,
yes.
Collaboration, people skills, as you just mentioned. Now, I don't know what story you're going to tell us, because of course we're going to talk about the failure story today, because today is Monday. I don't know what story you're going to tell us, but I want to explore that perspective. Like, what were some of those difficult aspects for you? Because you come, as you said very clearly, from an engineering background. So obviously even though you had that experience at school as a student doing NGO related tasks and working with teams, of course, it's still very different from being an engineer. The expectations are very different. So tell us that story of failure, that story of a difficult moment you had as a Scrum Master. We'll dive into the details and takeaways later, but tell us that story first.
So I think for me, I don't know if it's, I would consider it exactly a failure, but now I know I would have acted differently in this situation. So maybe we can try this out, see if this is the story that it's definitely a difficult situation. So when I started working as a Scrum Master, so a year later, I transitioned into doing this full time. So I had realized that actually that's what I want to do full time and not engineering. So then I found a job in my first startup as a full-time Scrum Master Agile coach. And of course, I was considered a junior then, right? So I didn't have much experience and so on and so forth. So the way people, especially engineering managers or heads of engineering or people with such titles in leadership, when you're a young woman in the industry and at the same time a junior in your role, it might be that in some situations your input is not taken so seriously, your skills are not considered very seriously, and so on and so forth. And this is one of the experiences I also had. So I was supposed to be the Scrum Master and coach one team in that startup. Well, many teams, but one is the one that I struggle with. And basically, I was always finding blockers from this head of engineering of that team.
Can you give an example of what that looked like?
Yeah, so for example, when I wanted to do some session with the team so that we can establish, we can figure out how they want to work, what type of meetings they want to have and stuff like that, right? So a kickoff basically for a new team. This person kind of prescribed the Scrum process to the team, and then he did the training himself to the team on Scrum, and basically he asked me to not organize that. So we didn't collaborate on organizing this. He did this all on his own, and he just asked me to attend, observe, and not talk. So you can imagine that was very difficult for the first also experience of someone doing this full time. And there were also many self-doubts, of course, right? Like I think many people would have, especially people that do it this first time as junior people. Like, is it me? Am I doing something wrong? Do I not know stuff, right? So what is going on? Like, it might just be me, right? This is a senior person. They know better, right? So you have all these doubts. So this was a very difficult situation. I very much struggled with. And I think basically what I consider, we can call it a failure, is that I didn't communicate what is important to me at that point, and why that I didn't try to not necessarily claim my ground, but say, hey, I'm here. I really want to help. I don't want to take space from you. I want to work with you. How can we make this work, right? So I'm sure we both want the same things, right? We both want the team to succeed. We both want to contribute. Nobody wants to block anyone. So how can we make this work?
And it's interesting that you say that. Like, so first of all, I totally understand the perspective that, okay, if somebody is doing something I don't necessarily find is the right thing, but because they're like my superior, or at least they have power over me through hierarchy in the organization, then of course you start thinking, did I do something wrong? Like, did I make a mistake that he doesn't want to talk about, right? Is that why he's taking over, right? Like there's that natural self-doubt that creeps in. Which is why it's so important to have a coach ourselves, right? So that we can discuss and process this. And then the other aspect that you mentioned, which I don't understand how you got to that conclusion. So I would like to ask you about that. The other statement that you said is that I failed to communicate what I wanted, what was important for me at that time. But how did you get to that conclusion? Like what was, maybe looking back, what were the things that led you to believe, okay, at this point I should have spoken up. I should have said, hey, I want to help. Let's work on this together, or something like that.
I think at that point, especially because this was a very overwhelming experience for me, which I think is totally reasonable and human that it happens. And as you said, I also didn't really have as much support maybe as I would need as a junior coach, right? So support structures were not very present for me. But all these things included, I kind of like, to a big extent, remained silent. So I did express partly and give feedback that this is not how it should be or something along these lines. I don't remember exactly because it has been some years, but I think I didn't really express what is important to me, right? What matters to me and how I feel actually. And now that I've done, of course, some work with myself through therapy, and also that I work a lot with nonviolent communication and empathy, I'm way more aware of all these things. So I can also more communicate those and have such
that what you just said is actually very important. And I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that, because of course there's a lot of people listening to us, excuse me, both juniors and seniors listening to us who might be right now in that situation you were at the time. So this self-awareness bit is very important, because we are like, even though we may not know what is going on, we always know what is going on deep down, right? Like if that were not the case, self-awareness would not be possible, right? We need to learn to read our own signs. We need to learn to listen to ourselves. And that's why having a coach is so important, because we can talk about what's going on, and an external person can look to us and see, okay, I see these patterns. Is that how you feel, right? So, when you do that work today, like when you try to be more self-aware, and perhaps, if you could go all the way back with a time machine, all the way back to that point again, how would you do that practice of assessing where you are, like that self-awareness bit, and how would you translate that then into action if you, with today's experience, were put in the same position again?
So I think one thing that I did also back then partly, and I would definitely do today, and I also recommend this to the people I work with, is what I call do sanity checks. Because if you stay on your own in this situation, it's very easy to think, oh, something I'm doing is wrong, or I don't get it, or anything along these lines. But if you explain the situation to someone else, someone external, and you can check, hey, is this actually a right behavior? Is this like how someone should collaborate with me? Is this how a manager should be working? And they can also tell you, no, actually, that's not maybe really appropriate, or no, you're not crazy, basically. That's what I mean by sanity check. And I very often say to people I work with, hey, if you ever need this, sharing your brain with someone and just someone listening to you, when you feel like you might be crazy, please, let's talk. Don't stay with these thoughts alone. So I think that's a very important part. And then at that point, I think I would honestly take care of myself first. So really try to connect either by talking to people or by giving myself empathy, or asking someone to empathize with me, a friend or a colleague, so that I gain more capacity in the situation, right? So I fill up my battery. So that then I can have a conversation with a person and I can listen first to them maybe, or I can express myself on how the situation is for me. That's what I mean by expressing, or empathizing with them by asking, hey, is it that you feel overwhelmed? It's so important to you that the team succeeds, and this is why you want to take over, because you, worry of X, Y, Z, right? So give them the space to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just did something that is very important for us to realize, that sometimes what we are feeling is what the other person needs, right? Because that is the core of being an empath, or being able to empathize with other people, is that sometimes we experience self-doubt as a reflection of other people's self-doubt. And by the way, taking control is very often a coping mechanism for self-doubt as well, right? And for me, from what you said, and I think this is a very important aspect for all of us who are out there in very often difficult positions, because this messes with people's core, right? Like self-doubt and not being sure and wanting to take control so that you don't feel insecure. All of those are really deep human experiences. And one thing that you said, I think is beautifully put, and I definitely recommend that to all of you listening to us, is to put yourself in a position where others empathize with you, like a friend or a colleague, and fill up your battery. And I think think you said it very beautifully, right? Like re-energize, get some energy back before trying to deal with what was, I bet, at that time, quite a difficult situation, both from the work perspective, but also emotionally, right?
Exactly, yes.
Great story. Thank you for sharing that, Sofia.
Thank you.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests help their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.